Welcome everyone to one of the most powerful and inspiring English learning stories on this channel. Today we begin a journey, not just a history lesson, but a journey into the life of a man who changed the world. His name is Martin Luther King Jr. In this story, you will learn more than just English. You will learn about hope, struggle, love, fear, courage, and the power of peaceful words. You will hear the true story of a man who was not a king by title, but a king in heart. The man who fought against hate using only his voice and his dream. This is not just any biography. This is a story told in the most simple, beautiful way, so that everyone, even if you're a beginner in English, can understand, enjoy, and feel every word. You are about to discover everything. His childhood, his parents, his house, his early thoughts, his fears, his dreams, his pain, every small detail. So sit back, relax, and let the story take you into the early life of Martin Luther King Jr. It was a cold winter day, January 15th, 1929, in a place called Atlanta, a city in the southern part of the United States of America. A baby boy was born in a small, peaceful home on Auburn Avenue, a street known for its black families, churches, music, and strong community. This boy was given a name, Michael King Jr. Yes, you heard that right. He was not originally called Martin. His name was changed later by his father, but we'll talk about that soon. The house was small but warm. The family didn't have a lot of money, but they had something more important: love, respect, and strong faith. Martin's father was Michael King Sr., a strong, serious, and deeply religious man. He was a Baptist preacher, a man who spoke in church and taught people about God, truth, and justice. His mother was Alberta Williams King, a kind, intelligent, and musical woman. She was a teacher, a pianist, and full of calm strength. She taught little Martin how to play the piano and how to speak gently, even when the world is loud. Both his parents were deeply spiritual. They taught him not to hate, but to love. Not to fight with fists, but to fight with wisdom. The name change. When Martin was around 5 years old, his father, Michael Sr., traveled to Germany. There, he learned about a man named Martin Luther, a Christian reformer who stood against wrong teachings in the church hundreds of years ago. Inspired by this brave man, Michael Sr. returned home and changed both his own name and his son's name, from Michael to Martin Luther King. So from that day, the little boy became known as Martin Luther King Jr. Martin was a curious child. He always asked, why? Why are people poor? Why do some children go to better schools than others? Why can't I play with white children? Yes, at a very young age, Martin noticed that the world was not fair. When he was only 6 years old, something very painful happened. He had a white friend. They played every day. But one day, that boy's parents said, "You can't play with Martin anymore. He's colored." Martin didn't understand. He went home and cried. His parents explained gently, "Martin, in this country, black people and white people are not treated equally. It's wrong, but it's the truth." That moment broke his heart, but it also opened his eyes. Martin lived in a 2-story wooden house with his grandparents, parents, his older sister Christine, and his younger brother Alfred. They were a close family. They ate meals together, prayed together, and laughed together. Every evening, the family sat at the dinner table. His father would ask, "What did you learn today?" And little Martin would speak about school, friends, and his thoughts. Even as a child, his words were strong. His voice was soft, but it had something special. It had sincerity. He loved to read books and listen to his father preach in church. He enjoyed Bible stories and would stand on a chair pretending to give speeches to his family like a little preacher. Martin was not a perfect child. He was smart, but sometimes he was stubborn. If he did something wrong, his parents would discipline him, sometimes with a belt, as was common at that time. But every punishment came with a hug and a lesson. They would say, "We do this because we love you, because we believe in the man you can become." This gave Martin a strong sense of right and wrong. Martin's family went to Ebenezer Baptist Church every Sunday. It was more than a building. It was a place where people cried, sang, hoped, and found strength. Young Martin watched his father preach and saw the crowd rise in emotion. He thought to himself, "One day I will speak like that. I will touch hearts too." The rhythm of the church songs, the words of the Bible, the energy of the crowd. All of this became part of Martin's soul. Martin started school earlier than most kids, at age 5. He was very intelligent, so he skipped 9th and 12th grade, which means he went to college at just 15 years old. But even as a student, he felt the pain of racism. He couldn't use certain libraries. He had to sit at the back of the bus. He saw signs that said, "Whites only," on water fountains, restaurants, and schools. These things made him angry, but he didn't scream. He watched. He thought. He listened. He told himself, "One day I will change this." As Martin grew older, the world around him became more difficult to ignore. The pain of segregation wasn't just in his childhood anymore. It followed him everywhere. But something inside him was changing. He was no longer a small boy who asked, "Why can't I play with them?" He was now a teenager quietly observing how the world treated people like him. By the time he was 13, he had already decided, "This is not right, and I must do something about it." He had seen his father stand up to white men in public without fear, and that image stayed in his heart. Once, they were shopping for shoes, and the white storekeeper told them to move to the back of the store because they were black. Martin watched as his father firmly said, "We'll either buy shoes sitting here, or we won't buy them at all." They left the store without buying anything. That moment lit a fire in Martin's young heart. Not a fire of hate, but a fire of pride, courage, and quiet strength. At just 15 years old, Martin skipped grades and entered Morehouse College in Atlanta, a college only for black men at that time. It was a place where young black boys were trained to become leaders. Imagine this. Most 15-year-olds are still in school, but Martin was already in college, walking among men much older than him. In the beginning, he didn't plan to become a preacher like his father. He wanted to become a doctor or a lawyer. He felt religion was too emotional and didn't answer all the questions of the world. But something happened inside him while at Morehouse. He started reading the words of powerful thinkers and writers. He read the Bible again, but this time with deeper eyes. He read books by philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, and especially a man named Mahatma Gandhi, whose nonviolent fight for India's freedom deeply touched Martin's soul. He began to see that words, peace, and moral strength were stronger than fists or guns. Slowly, the desire to serve, to guide, and to change the world through words began to grow in him. And by the end of his time at Morehouse, Martin had made up his mind. He would become a minister, just like his father and grandfather, but with his own voice, his own ideas, and his own way of walking the path. After finishing Morehouse, Martin went to Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania. Now, this was the first time he truly lived among white students, and it wasn't easy. Most of them were polite, but Martin always felt a quiet wall between them. He was a brilliant student. He read everything: the Bible, theology, philosophy, poetry. He even started studying psychology to understand how the human mind works. He was serious, but not cold. He laughed, he played, and he even won awards for being the most outstanding student in the class. But behind his success, he was still trying to find his true voice. He once wrote in his diary, "I have a deep urge to serve humanity." This was not a boy playing church. This was a man searching for the best way to heal a broken world. He didn't want to just preach in a church. He wanted to touch people's souls. He wanted to stop wars, stop racism, stop poverty. And he was looking for the tools to do that. It was also during this time that Martin began to experience deep loneliness. Living away from home, surrounded by people who didn't understand the pain of being black in America, he often felt alone. He would write letters to his mother and father, telling them how much he missed them and how much he loved them. But in his heart, there was still hope. He knew something big was waiting for him. During his time in seminary, Martin also learned to speak with calm power. He practiced his speeches, read them out loud in his room, tested different tones. He was creating a voice that was firm but gentle, strong but peaceful. His dream was not to become famous. His dream was to be useful, to become a bridge between pain and peace. After Crozer, Martin wanted to go even higher, so he moved to Boston, where he studied for his PhD in theology at Boston University. Boston was very different from the South. The racism was not as loud, but it was still there in small, hidden ways. In Boston, something very special happened. He met the woman who would change his life forever. Her name was Coretta Scott. She was a young, beautiful, educated woman who studied music at the New England Conservatory. She was smart, confident, talented, and full of grace. Martin was drawn to her not just because of her beauty, but because of her mind and heart. She cared about civil rights. She believed in peace, justice, and human dignity. Just like Martin. Their first meeting was arranged by a friend, and after talking with her, Martin said, "She is not only attractive, but she has character." They started dating. They would take long walks, talk about books, music, politics, and the future. Martin would often call her and read poetry to her over the phone. He said she made him feel like home. They got married in 1953 in Alabama, in a small ceremony where Martin's father performed the service. Coretta later became his partner in every struggle, every speech, every march. She was not just his wife. She was his equal, his strength, and his silent warrior. While working on his PhD, Martin also worked at churches, gave sermons, and helped people who were in need. He believed that faith was not just about praying, it was about acting. He often told people, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." He finished his PhD in 1955, becoming Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And soon after, he became the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. It was a small church, but his voice was growing. He was only 26 years old, but when he stood in the pulpit and spoke, people felt something powerful. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He spoke with rhythm, with honesty, with passion. People began to say, "There is something different about this man. He is going to lead us somewhere new." And then something happened in Montgomery that would change Martin's life and the entire world forever. One day, a black woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white man on a segregated bus. She was arrested. This small act of courage became a spark. Black leaders in Montgomery came together and said, "We need to fight this injustice. We need a leader, someone young, educated, calm, and brave." They chose Martin. It was not something he planned. He had only just arrived in the city. But destiny was calling, and Martin said yes. From that moment, Martin's journey as a civil rights leader truly began. But he was not ready yet for the storms that would come. He had no idea that soon people would threaten his life, his family, and everything he loved. But still, he stood strong. Because he believed, deep in his soul, that nonviolence, love, and truth were stronger than fear, bullets, or hate. Martin didn't ask for fame. He didn't chase attention. But sometimes, history doesn't wait for people to be ready. It chooses them. And when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat in December 1955, history knocked on Martin's door. At just 26 years old, he stood in front of a crowd in a church filled with black men and women, many of them scared, angry, and tired. Tired of being humiliated every single day. Tired of sitting at the back of the bus, drinking from separate fountains, using separate bathrooms, and being treated like second-class citizens. They didn't want violence. They wanted dignity. They wanted to be heard. And Martin, calm, confident, young but wise, stood up and said words that would echo through time. If we are wrong, justice is a lie. If we are wrong, then the Constitution of the United States is a fake. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong. The people in the church didn't just listen. They stood up and clapped. They cried, they nodded. In that moment, a leader was born. A leader who didn't carry weapons. A leader who carried truth in his voice and love in his heart. The Montgomery bus boycott began the next day. For 381 days, yes, more than a full year, black citizens of Montgomery refused to ride city buses. Think about that. Imagine walking to work, to school, to church every single day, through cold mornings, rainy days, and hot afternoons. Imagine mothers walking miles with heavy bags of groceries. Grandmothers with sore knees still refusing to sit on those buses. Fathers coming home from 12-hour shifts and walking 2 more miles just to say, "I did not ride today." That's how serious they were. They were not just walking. They were making a statement. We will no longer accept being treated like less. And behind all of it, guiding, planning, inspiring, was Martin Luther King Jr. But leading this movement was not easy. It came with a heavy price. Just a few weeks into the boycott, Martin received a call late at night. A man's angry voice said, "If you're not out of this town in 3 days, we're gonna blow your brains out and blow up your house." Martin put down the phone. His hands were shaking. His wife Coretta was asleep in the next room, and their baby daughter was in her crib. He went into the kitchen, sat at the table, put his head in his hands, and whispered a prayer. "Lord, I'm scared. I'm losing courage. I'm at the end of my powers. I have nothing left." And then, in the silence of that kitchen, He felt something, a presence, a voice in his heart that said, "Stand up for truth. Stand up for justice. I will be with you." From that night, Martin was no longer afraid. He knew he might die, but he was ready, because he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for his people, for his child, for every child. But the threats didn't stop. One evening, while Martin was at a meeting, someone threw a bomb into his house. The blast shook the walls, shattered windows, and sent smoke rising into the sky. Coretta and the baby were inside. Miraculously, they survived. When Martin rushed home and saw the crowd gathering outside, police everywhere, his heart dropped. But when he saw Coretta holding their baby safely, tears filled his eyes. People were angry, ready to fight. Some had brought guns. But Martin stood on the broken porch of his house and raised his hand. He said, "We must meet hate with love. We must meet violence with nonviolence." And the people listened. They put down their weapons, because their leader had reminded them, peace is power. The boycott continued. Day after day, Martin gave speeches, organized carpools, answered threats, and held people together. He was arrested. He was fined. He was called names in newspapers. But he never gave up. He walked when others walked. He prayed when others lost hope. Finally, after over a year of walking, suffering, and standing strong, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation on buses was illegal. Victory. The people cheered, danced, hugged each other in the streets. But Martin didn't just celebrate. He warned them. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. And he was right. After Montgomery, Martin became a national figure. But with fame came danger. His every move was watched. The FBI under J. Edgar Hoover began spying on him. They tapped his phones, followed him around, even tried to break his marriage by sending threatening letters. But Martin refused to be broken. He kept moving forward. He traveled across America, preaching about love, justice, and nonviolence. He met with presidents. He sat in jail cells. He led marches. He hugged mothers whose sons were killed. He spoke to crowds of thousands, always reminding them, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. By the early 1960s, Martin had become the face of the civil rights movement. He helped create the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, an organization that trained young people to fight with peace, not fists. He led campaigns in cities like Albany, Birmingham, and Selma. Each time he faced dogs, fire hoses, police batons, jail time. And still he smiled. Still he walked. Still he spoke. One of the most powerful moments came in Birmingham, Alabama, when he and young black children marched peacefully and police turned water cannons and dogs on them. The images shocked the world. How could anyone attack children? Martin knew this pain was needed to open people's eyes. And it worked. The world began to listen. People in other countries started supporting the movement. The pressure was growing. Then came the moment that defined everything. August 28th, 1963. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Over 250,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C., black and white, young and old, hand in hand, waiting to hear Martin speak. The sun was hot, the air was heavy. But when he stepped up to the microphone, something magical happened. His voice was calm at first. He talked about injustice, about the broken promises of America. But then, someone behind him, a singer named Mahalia Jackson, shouted, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." And he did. He spoke words that shook the soul of a nation. "I have a dream that one day little black boys and black girls will join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last." The crowd exploded in cheers. People cried, people hugged. That speech wasn't just words. It was hope in human form. It wasn't just about race. It was about freedom, dignity, and unity for all. But after the dream came reality. More jail time, more threats, more struggle. In 1964, Martin won the Nobel Peace Prize, the youngest man ever to receive it at that time. But instead of relaxing, he used the money to support the movement. He started to speak out not just about racism, but also poverty and war. He said, "What good is having the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a burger?" He began to fight for the poor, black, white, Native, Hispanic, all people suffering under inequality. By now, the entire world knew who he was. But with great recognition came even greater pressure, danger, and responsibility. His face was on television screens. His words were printed in newspapers. His name was written in history. Yet, he was still a man, a husband, a father, a dreamer. At home, his family life continued to be filled with love, but also fear. His wife, Coretta Scott King, often stayed awake at night, listening for unusual sounds, terrified of another bomb or attack. Their children, Yolanda, Martin III, Dexter, and Bernice, were growing up in a world where their father was both a hero and a target. Every time he left the house, there was no guarantee he would return. But Martin, even with this constant fear, remained calm. He had trained his mind to stay focused, to keep going no matter what. During this time, King expanded his fight for justice beyond the South. He began addressing housing discrimination in the North. In 1966, he moved into a rundown apartment in Chicago to show the terrible living conditions that many black families faced. The apartment was cold, the windows were broken, and rats ran across the floor. King lived there on purpose, to understand their pain, to feel their struggle, and to wake up the world. He marched through the streets of Chicago, where angry crowds screamed at him. People threw bricks and rocks. One of those bricks hit him in the head. He bled. He staggered. But he didn't stop. Instead, he straightened up and kept marching. When someone asked him how he could face so much hate, he simply said, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend." But as King continued his work, not everyone agreed with him anymore. Some younger civil rights activists thought his methods were too slow. They believed in fighting back with force. They called for revolution, not patience. King respected their frustration, but he never changed his belief in nonviolence. He often said, "Returning hate for hate multiplies hate. Only love can drive out hate." In 1967, King took a bold step that surprised many of his supporters. He spoke out strongly against the Vietnam War. While many leaders avoided the topic, King stood at Riverside Church in New York and delivered a speech titled "Beyond Vietnam." He called America the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. That line alone caused a political storm. Newspapers turned against him. Donations slowed down. Even President Lyndon B. Johnson, who had once supported civil rights laws, became angry. But King didn't back down. He said, "A time comes when silence is betrayal." That same year, King launched what he called the Poor People's Campaign. He realized that racial equality was only part of the problem. He believed poverty was another kind of slavery, and it didn't care about skin color. Black, white, Hispanic, Native American, millions of people were suffering. So, King planned a march on Washington, not just for civil rights, but for economic justice. He wanted to bring thousands of poor people to the nation's capital and camp there until the government took action. But before that could happen, something urgent pulled him to Memphis, Tennessee. In March 1968, a group of black sanitation workers went on strike. They were treated unfairly, paid low wages, and forced to work in dangerous conditions. Two of them, Eckel Cole and Robert Walker, had been crushed to death in a garbage truck. Their deaths sparked outrage. The workers carried signs that read, "I am a man." They demanded respect, safety, and fair pay. King knew he had to stand with them. So he flew to Memphis. But tensions were high. A previous march had turned violent when some young protesters broke windows. King was heartbroken. He knew that if his movement was going to succeed, it had to stay peaceful. So he returned to Memphis a few days later, determined to lead a nonviolent march. On the evening of April 3, 1968, King delivered what would become his final speech. He stood at the Mason Temple Church in front of a packed audience. Outside, a storm raged. Thunder roared and rain beat down. Inside, King's voice thundered louder. He spoke with fire, as if he knew the end was near. He said, "We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." People cried. They cheered. Some felt chills run down their spines. It was more than a speech. It was a prophecy. The next day, April 4th, 1968, was calm at first. King was staying at the Lorraine Motel in room 306. That evening, he stepped out onto the balcony to get some fresh air before dinner. He laughed and talked with friends. Then, at 6:01 p.m., a gunshot tore through the silence. The bullet struck him in the face, cutting through his jaw and spine. He fell. Blood poured from his wound. People screamed. Chaos erupted. His friends ran to him, shouting, praying, crying. He was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital, but the damage was too great. At 7:05 p.m., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was pronounced dead. He was just 39 years old. News of his death spread across the world within hours. Cities exploded in riots. Fires burned. People screamed in grief and anger. In homes across America and beyond, millions sat in silence, watching the news, feeling as if the sun itself had gone dark. The news moved fast, on radios, black and white TVs, and in every newspaper. In homes, churches, schools, and streets, people cried. Some sat in silence, others fell to their knees. Some were angry, many felt lost. But the world didn't stop. Instead, something powerful happened, something King himself had always believed in. You may kill the dreamer, but you cannot kill the dream. And that is exactly what happened. In more than 100 cities across America, people poured into the streets. Some marched peacefully, holding candles and pictures of Dr. King. Others, full of pain and anger, began to protest violently. Buildings burned, glass shattered, sirens wailed through the night. Washington, D.C., Chicago, Baltimore, all turned into battlegrounds of grief. People asked, why him? Why now? But through that fire, something else was burning too. A call for change. Dr. King had spent his life shaking the conscience of America. And now, in death, he had shaken it even more. Just 1 week later, on April 11th, 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, also known as the Fair Housing Act. This law made it illegal to refuse to rent or sell homes to people because of their race, religion, or background. It was something King had been fighting for in Chicago. He didn't live to see it, but his death made it happen. On April 9th, 1968, King's funeral was held. Thousands came, not just famous leaders, but ordinary people. Farmers, mothers, janitors, students, teachers, soldiers. They all walked, many in tears, behind the wagon that carried his coffin. It wasn't a golden car. It wasn't expensive. It was a simple wooden wagon pulled by 2 mules. Just as King would have wanted, humble, close to the people. Inside churches and across radios, one of his favorite songs played, "Precious Lord, Take My Hand." And as that song played, many closed their eyes and whispered his words. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. King had planted seeds, not in the ground, but in the minds and hearts of millions. And those seeds began to grow. His children took the torch. His wife, Coretta Scott King, didn't stop. She became a voice for peace, justice, and women's rights. She opened the King Center in Atlanta, a place to keep her husband's vision alive. Their children, Yolanda, Martin III, Dexter, and Bernice, also carried his message forward in different ways. They became speakers, activists, and leaders, reminding the world of who their father was. A holiday for a king. For years, people demanded a national holiday in King's name. Some said no, others fought hard. But finally, in 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill creating Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a national holiday to honor him every year on the 3rd Monday of January. The first official holiday was celebrated in 1986. Today, people across America, and in some countries around the world, take that day to remember his message of love, justice, and unity. Streets, schools, and statues. More than 900 streets in America are now named after Dr. King. Thousands of schools, libraries, and buildings bear his name. In 2011, a giant stone memorial was built in Washington, D.C., not far from the Lincoln Memorial where King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. His face is carved into rock, standing tall like a mountain, solid, unshakable. Before King, it was normal for Black Americans to be treated unfairly. They couldn't vote freely, live where they wanted, or attend certain schools. Many lived in fear. Because of King's work, Black Americans won the right to vote freely. Segregation in schools and public places was outlawed. Millions of people of all races started to believe in equality. His ideas crossed oceans. In South Africa, India, and even Europe, people followed his methods to fight injustice. More than 50 years have passed since his death, but Martin Luther King Jr.'s voice still lives. Every time someone chooses peace over violence, every time someone stands up for the weak, every time someone says, "I have a dream," King's spirit is alive. Why his story still matters today. Many young people today never saw King on TV. They never heard him speak live. Yet his words still move hearts. Why? Because King was more than a leader. He was a mirror, showing us what we could become if we chose love over hate. He believed in a world where people are judged not by skin color but by character. Love is stronger than fear. One voice can change a nation. He didn't carry a sword. He carried hope. And hope is the most powerful weapon of all. Martin Luther King Jr. was not just a speaker. He was also a writer. He wrote books to share his ideas, his dreams, and his fight for justice. His words gave people hope. One of his most famous books is Why We Can't Wait, where he explained why the fight for civil rights could not be delayed. He also wrote Stride Toward Freedom, which tells the story of the Montgomery bus boycott. His books are full of truth, courage, and love. Even today, people read them to learn how to stand up for what is right. His words still teach the world how to fight hate with peace and how to dream big, no matter how hard life gets. What can we learn from him? King once said, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" That is the question we must still ask ourselves. So let us not just remember Dr. King. Let us become what he believed in. Be kind, be brave, stand up when it's easier to stay silent. Speak peace when the world screams anger, and always, always keep dreaming. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't live a long life, but he lived a great one. He didn't have money, power, or an army. He had something stronger, a voice full of truth, a heart full of love, and a dream big enough to change the world. He taught us that you don't have to be perfect to make a difference. You don't need to shout in anger. You don't need to fight with fists. You just need courage, kindness, and belief. Lessons from his life. Simple and powerful. 1. Stand up. Even if you're alone. King stood up against racism and injustice when many people told him to stay silent. He wasn't afraid to speak truth. Lesson: if something is wrong, don't be silent. Even one voice can shake the world. 2. Fight with peace, not hate. While others chose violence, King chose peace. He believed in nonviolence even when people hurt him. Lesson: love is stronger than hate. Peace is stronger than fear. 3. Keep going, even when it's hard. He was threatened. He was jailed. He was attacked. But he kept walking, kept marching, kept dreaming. Lesson: when life is hard, don't give up. Keep going. The path to change is never easy, but it's worth it. 4. Dream big, bigger than yourself. His dream wasn't just for himself. It was for every child, every man, every woman, for the whole world. Lesson: have dreams not just for you, but for others too. Be a light for those in darkness. 5. Leave the world better than you found it. He didn't live to see all the change he wanted. But because of him, millions now live with more freedom and dignity. Lesson: your life matters. Even after you're gone, your words and actions can keep helping others. If Dr. King could speak to you today, he would say, "You matter. You are powerful. You have a voice. You can dream. You can rise. You can help others. You can bring light to the darkest places. So don't wait. Don't doubt. Don't be afraid. The world needs your voice. The world needs your heart. Be the reason someone believes in peace, in love, and in hope again." He said, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward." Dr. King's story is not just a story of the past. It's a mirror. It asks you, what kind of person will you be? Will you stay quiet or speak up? Will you close your eyes or open your heart? Will you hate or will you love? The dream is now in your hands. So dream big, Live bravely, love deeply, and be the change, just like Martin Luther King Jr. Because one day, someone will tell your story, and let it be a story of hope, kindness, and courage. The story of a person who did not give up, who chose love, and who helped change the world. Let that person be you. This is the end of Martin Luther King Jr. story, but also the beginning of your story, my story, our story. Because every time we choose justice, we are continuing his dream. He may have left this world at 39, but in truth, Dr. King never died. He became a voice that echoes forever in the hearts of those who dare to dream. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories and easy English practice. See you next time with another inspiring story. Keep learning, keep growing.